The best brands define their PR wow in a clear, concise, and compelling way to attract major media coverage, fans, and sales. Find out their marketing and public relations secrets today on 8 Second Branding with host Liz H. Kelly. Liz is the founder of Goody PR and the author of 8 Second PR. In each episode, she brings you the stories behind some of the best brands, CEOs, and authors. Plus, she explains how media appearances alone are 3 times more valuable than any paid ad. Now, here's your host, Liz Kelly.
Hello, this is Liz Kelly with 8 Second Branding, getting to your PR wow. And we have an incredible guest today, Jay Samit. He has a new book coming out. It's called Future Proofing You, and we're going to talk about all of that. And he's got the copy there. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Thanks for having me, Liz. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And there is so much to unpack here and so many great things that you're doing. So the book is great. The first book, though, let's talk about that just real quick. That was called Disrupt You. And that was 5 years ago. And that's how we met at a networking event. So can you talk briefly about Disrupt You? And then we'll go into the new book.
I've had a very charmed career. I've sat in an empty room and created things like the first auction, which you know is eBay, or sit with Reid Hoffman and create LinkedIn. And I've also run multinationals. So I've been on both sides of it. And I realized people weren't taught how to be successful in this world of endless innovation. So that's why I wrote Disrupt You as my way of paying it forward. What I didn't expect, it was the most transformational experience of my life. When you're a NASDAQ CEO, your inbox is, I hate you, problem, sue, whatever. When you change people's lives, you hear from them all over. And so the book's in 12 languages. This year it comes out in Urdu, Icelandic, Polish. But occasionally I'd get an email that would basically say, this is all motivational, but I could never do it. And that really aided me. Why was I unable to reach certain people? So I decided to put my reputation on the line, and Future Proofing You is the story of, I took a young man who grew up on welfare, who was homeless, couch surfing, and I mentored him one day a week for a year. I gave him no contacts. I gave him no capital. I didn't tell him what to do. He ended up doing a marketing agency, and he went from welfare to self-made millionaire in 11 months. It wasn't easy. He worked hard. But he was willing to work harder than most people will to live in a way that most people can't. So that's how we got to where we are.
Fantastic. Well, and I really should do more of an introduction because a lot of people may not know who you are, and it's just incredible. So I'm going to read just a little bit. You are an international best-selling author, entrepreneur, change agent, which is really the theme of your books, and intrapreneur. And everybody calls you, from the Pope to the president. You've had clients that are visionaries like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Reid Hoffman, and some of your corporate clients have been American Express, AT&T, Best Buy, Disney, and a lot more. So there is so much here. So if you're not following Jay Samit, please do it and go to his website. It's Jay Samit, SAMIT.com, jaysamit.com. So with that all in mind, I want to go back to the beginning of your career where you talked about in your TED Talk, which I want to talk about how you did that at the end. Because everybody I know wants to do a TED Talk. But first of all, you talk about how you launched your first company with $1. So let's start there. How did you do that?
So when I got out of school, Star Wars was the new thing. Oh, it changed my life. I'm sure I'm not alone with that. And I was going to do Hollywood special effects. But I didn't know how to get a job. I didn't know how to get a foot in the door. So I printed business cards for $1. And I was smart enough to know no one's going to hire a 21-year-old CEO of a special effects company to do their feature film. Like, who are you? So I just made myself head of sales. The company was named Jasmine, was my initials, JAS, and it was mine. And I went out and hustled. I didn't know how to do any of the stuff I was hustling. But once you get the work, then you can hire people that know how to do it. And that's the central theme of both my books. The only two things you need to be successful are insight and perseverance. Everything else can be hired. So I've done this again and again. Steve Jobs built the first trillion-dollar company, and he's written as much code as you have, Liz, which is zero. He was a marketer. So people are intimidated by these things, yet there's always new opportunity. And so what I've learned is I noticed a pattern that, every 48 hours, there's a new self-made billionaire. What are they doing? How did Kylie Jenner become a billionaire at 22? Oh, well, she's a Kardashian. There were no billionaires in the Kardashian family. So can this be taught? I teach this at USC. I had students do $150 million the first semester. So it can be taught. And this is my way of paying it forward. Not to get into politics here, but when I looked at what happened in our nation's capital in January, what I saw were thousands of people feeling left out, left behind, fighting over leftovers, because what we were taught, the way society works, isn't what it is today. So that's what I'm about. And it all comes down to marketing, to making those connections, because you're one click away from 7 billion people. It's the greatest time to be a marketer.
I think that's such an important point. So what do you think made Steve Jobs such a great marketer?
An amoral compass, and the amazing good fortune of having to met and work with it when he was at Atari, his partner, who turned out to be the smartest computer guy of that era. And Wozniak could see where things were headed, and Steve knew how to sell and market.
Fantastic. No, I think it's a great example, and I want to dig deeper into your example. So why don't you tell us more about, let's see, what was his name? Vin?
Vin.
Who you helped. Tell us about him. And I know this is in your new book, The Future Proofing You, which we can't wait to read. It's coming out March 23rd. So everybody, please go to Amazon, buy Future Proofing You. So tell us about that story and how he started a marketing agency and what was different.
So a good mentor doesn't tell you what to see, they just tell you where to look. So he, being a millennial, grew up with social media. He thought he understood it, thought he could do it for others. Well, when you're one kid with no background or anything, you're not suddenly going to get Ford Motor or Coca-Cola or, IBM to hire you. And so the only people he would know would be, other people without any money. They could pay him $100 or something a month. So one of the 12 truths that I shared with him is fill a void. So I may be successful, but I hate competition, because I know on any given day there's somebody smarter, better connected, richer, better looking, just plain old better than me. But if I do something nobody else is doing, by definition, I'm the best in the world. So if you want to do social media, there's 40 million people doing social media. Look at the zeitgeist. Look what people are talking about. What is a new field? And then stake your claim that you are the social media expert for that field, because doing social media is the same whether you're doing it for anything. So the year that I was mentoring him, the big news was cryptocurrency. Bitcoin went from 1,000 to 20,000. Everybody's going crazy. And a whole lot of other people wanted to come out with new coins, and they needed quick marketing because that market was going to disappear fast. So he modestly named his agency the world's greatest agency. And he got his first client. And even if your first client's for free, in MBA, Harvard Business School talk, the second you do it for your first client, you now have a case study. So his first client, he went out and killed it for them. They had amazing results. So by client number 2, what he used to charge for $200 a month, he was now charging $30,000 a month. And he just built the business from there.
I love it. And that's exactly what we did with Goody PR. We had no case studies. We had no experience. So we worked for almost a year for free to build up those case studies. And now 10 years later, we are still working with people that worked on that first project with us.
I had a digital agency that I was CEO of that was struggling. And so we started doing stuff for charities, because what is a charity? A charity is an organization whose board is made up of top executives of their companies. 18 months later, I sold that startup to News Corp for $200 million. So you can do this pattern. What you have to understand is where wealth comes from. And that's the other thing that we don't teach people. It's not I buy banana for $1 and sell it to you for $2. That's a zero-sum game. It's when you create something new. If I sold you 10% of my new company for $10,000, what do I now have? I have $10,000 in cash and $90,000 in equity. So people don't understand that concept. That's how Jeff Bezos could lose money year after year after year for a decade and come out the other side of that as the richest man in the world.
That's a really good point about equity, because a lot of people don't think about that. They just think, let's keep working to get a paycheck. And I know one of the things you talk about is, working for a job that you can't stand and having no security. So what would you recommend to somebody, say, who's home with a pandemic and they're on Zoom calls all day for a job that they can't stand? What would you recommend to them?
So I would look at the silver lining, assuming you didn't get afflicted with this horrible disease. This suddenly gave everybody lots of extra time. It was a gift of time. You're not commuting, you're not running around, you're not going to the game, whatever it might be. So what a great time to launch your side hustle. So disruption isn't about what happens to you, it's about how you respond to what happens to you. So during the pandemic, the 150 wealthiest Americans doubled their net worth. Let that sink in. Not what they make in a year, doubled their lifetime worth in 1 year. Wow. The bottom 140 million Americans are clawing to get 1%. So what did those other people do differently? How can you do that same thing? And it's about focusing on those priorities. People don't realize how much time they just fritter away and waste when they could be investing that time in their future. Most jobs pay you enough to show up and not enough to care. Most jobs you're not learning and growing. And so eventually you wake up one day and realize that you traded your whole life for a waste of time, the most precious gift you'll ever have. And so if you believe your life is about purpose, why not start trying to solve one of these many problems? Entrepreneurs solve problems, they don't sell things. So look around at your life. If you have problems, you're halfway to success.
That's such an important point. And I think that the hardest part is taking that leap from the corporate world to the entrepreneur. So in 2008, when I got laid off from MySpace and so many people had gotten laid off, I decided I wanted to start my own PR company and I wanted to take that leap of faith. And the first thing I did was I went to a conference with entrepreneurs who then were high-fiving me and saying, congratulations, you just got out of the corporate rat race and now we're here to help you. And I met so many great connections there, but it really does take a lot to take that leap of faith. So from a psychological standpoint, what do you advise people?
So you touched on a whole bunch of key points in there. The first one is the very first truth of the 12 truths is you have to have a growth mindset. You have to think positively. When I found this young man for future-proofing you, I knew I didn't have time for him to slowly develop that self-confidence. If I want to see somebody make it to a millionaire in a year. So I lied to him. He didn't find this out until he read the book. On our first meeting, I did something called the Pygmalion effect. The Pygmalion effect was developed by a professor at Riverside University, where they went to an elementary school, they tested all the kids, and they told the teachers these 3 students would be super achievers, super growers, would do the best this year. And at the end of the year, when they tested the kids, those 3 kids excelled the most. But the professor lied. He never looked at the test results of the first test. He just picked 3 names out of a hat. If you tell people they're special and you treat them special, they'll believe it. And if all you need is insight and perseverance, if that person now believes it and they have a growth mindset, they're on the road. So I told Vin when I met him that I had interviewed over 100 candidates and he was the only one that had all the attributes to be a millionaire. When in fact, he's the only one I interviewed. Because if I cherry picked somebody, it wouldn't be first test. The other thing you talked about was fear. So people are afraid of, I'll lose money, I'll be embarrassed, I'll lose other people's money, whatever the fears are. And I hate those motivational guys that say fear isn't real. fear is as real as can be. It's hardwired, the oldest part of our brain, the fight or flight. Those are real fears. But if you focus on a greater fear, if a truck's barreling down on you when you're walking on the sidewalk, you're not thinking about being embarrassed. You're going to just run. So if you realize that the bigger fear is wasting your life day by day, year by year at a job that doesn't allow you to live the way that you want, that's the fear you should focus on. Those other things will become secondary. The other point that you touched on when you went to that first mentoring session is truth number 8, don't fly solo. The myth of the self-made man or woman is just that, it's a myth. Nobody got there on their own. Oprah was mentored by Barbara Walters. Zuckerberg was mentored by Jobs. Everybody has. And in today's fast-changing world, you're going to need a series of mentors. So in Future Proofing You, I show people how to use LinkedIn to develop mentors. And it's not sending an email cold, which I get all the time. Hey, will you be my mentor? That's like walking up to a woman at a bar and go, hey, will you have my baby? It just doesn't work that way. So you can look at what their interests are. Why are they posting things on LinkedIn? They're posting to have a dialogue. Start that dialogue, and you could have a lifelong mentor without ever using the M word.
And you just brought up some really great points and some things that maybe listeners may need to know, which really helped me, is about the team and what I needed. So I needed somebody in accounting to do my books because I don't want to do that. You want to find people that will do things that are not your strength. I also had to get a legal person because we just live in a litigious society and you have to be ready. If somebody doesn't want to pay a bill, how are you going to get that bill paid? There's other things like getting copyrights and trademarks. So you need some kind of legal arm. And then it's not as scary. And then you need somebody to run ideas off who is in your area of expertise. So with me, with marketing and public relations, I had about 5 people, and I would pick up the phone and say, how much should I charge this person? What should I do? I've got this difficult client. What do I do now? All of these things are really important no matter what business you're in, but especially in marketing, when so much of it is about building relationships. So do you have any other things that maybe I left out that are important about your team?
So on the team part of it, here's the biggest difference post-pandemic. People have been telecommuting for years. Started in the 1970s, was paying, you had to messenger stuff around. Now, when you have companies like Nationwide Insurance can suddenly flip a switch and 98% of people work from home or Google or whatever, we're not going back to that other world. But for a team, here's the big difference. When you started your company, when anybody started their business, they didn't get to hire the best people. They get to hire the best people that live within 10 miles or 20 miles or whatever that commuting distance is. Now with remote workers, you can hire the best people on the planet. And they may be in a place where they can work for much less. Conversely, you don't have to be based in the most expensive city where you live in some small little apartment. You can live anywhere or be a digital nomad and work this month in Thailand and next month run with the Bulls in Spain. So I list in the book 22 software tools that are all free when you're starting of how you can run a remote business, because that is your new competitive advantage, because you don't need the overhead of an office. You don't need the overhead of full-time staff. You can channel the best talent for when you need them. And, 99 Designs, I don't know if you use that as a great example for logos. You say, I'm going to pay $500 for logo. You get 1,000 people around the world submit the logo. And I'm always amazed after I do it. I ask the person who I pick, where are you? Sometimes it's somebody doing a side hustle that works at a major ad agency. And sometimes it's a college kid in Bangalore, right? So you can get great talent. And conversely, you can get those marketing clients anywhere in the world.
Exactly. We've had clients in Canada and Saudi Arabia and England. So really, you can have clients anywhere in the world. And one thing that I will share is the 8-second branding, the name of the podcast. comes from my book, which is called 8-Second PR. And it's because the average attention span of an adult is 8 seconds. So you have to get to the point and be clear, concise, and compelling. But the reason why I bring this up now is because this book was totally put together, the design, the cover, by outsourced resources. I could not design this cover. And then you have to get a designer to do the inside of the book. And that was a separate person. And we got them on a site called Readsy. And it worked really great because you have different people who will bid on your project. So the resources are out there. The other thing that we do is we have a virtual team for Goody PR that are in different cities all around the country. So our social media person, for example, is in Sun Valley, Idaho, but we've also used people in India for the book. So you have no limits anymore with geography, with getting your team.
If success is so attainable, what's stopping most people? And you have to break down those barriers. When you lay them out in a book, and you read my first book, as you hear each one of the reasons that's stopping you, they seem silly, and then you're free. I mean, some of the myths that I got the latest research in the new book: people with higher IQs don't end up wealthier. People with a 4-year college degree no longer end up wealthier. Okay. So what is it? What is it that made 16 million people millionaires? What are they doing different? How are they using these tools to their advantage? The big giant companies built all this infrastructure. There are no gatekeepers from your success. And to be in marketing at a time where everybody is starting new things, that means every day there's thousands of new clients that are available. And that's what we did with Vin. Vin figured this out. And the reason why I call it future-proofing you is by the time he got to, the end of the year, it was like a marathon runner. He hadn't dated for a year, hadn't gone out, hadn't watched TV. I mean, he worked hard. It was like Navy SEALs training. And what kept him to the finish line was, when this is over, I'm traveling for a year, right? I'm just taking the year off. And the reason he was able to do that was not because he had amassed a bunch of money. He was able to do that because he knew he was future-proof. He knew that anytime he wanted to start a work, he can do it. So fast forward now, he does have multinational giant clients, and he can work from wherever in the world he wants to be. So he's living that work-life balance the way he chooses because he didn't put off planning his future. And that's the message I'm trying to get to everybody.
I love that message. I think one of the key things is also, you talked about fear, but it's also about taking that leap of faith and believing in yourself and believing in whatever you want to do. Because I remember when I started the Goody Awards for social good, and we were going to give a big award to somebody that was going to be presented at Deutsche Advertising. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I was in a planning meeting with somebody from Deutsche. And I said to them, I'm just going to fake it until I make it, and you probably have a better way to say that. But I was like, I'm just going to act like I know what I'm doing. And eventually I will get it, and it will go. And it did. But that was a really important message to myself, with just go for it.
Nobody was born an Olympic athlete. Nobody was born a master chef. So the real question is there a faster path for you to get the skills that you need to get to where you want to do than years of apprenticeship or, whatever it might be? And one of the things I suggest people zero in on, and it's one of the 12 truths in future-proofing you, is to really embrace your superpower. Everybody has something that makes them unique. It is your strength. And no two people have the same thing. And, when friends come to you for advice, pay attention. What are they asking? Why are they coming to you? Because they recognize that you have something. And the superpower can be almost anything. There was a young man in middle school with ADD. And so his parents gave him Ritalin, and the doctors gave him Ritalin. He was doped up all the time. He hated it. But his mind raced and he couldn't control it. So he learned that when he was swimming in the pool in the backyard, he could calm his mind. So he went to his mom, can I get off these drugs if I promise to swim every day? And the doctors agreed and everything. And by the time he was 17, he had 17 Olympic medals. You know him as Michael Phelps. His superpower isn't swimming. His superpower was having ADD. I was born dyslexic. I'm still dyslexic. Richard Branson's dyslexic. Walt Disney's dyslexic. 1 out of 3 Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic. Guess what? It's not a curse. It is a superpower. I don't see linearly. I don't think linearly. I'll lean into that and use that to my advantage. So I have friends that are super connectors. Reid Hoffman, who's one of the smartest guys I've ever met, he can see into the future farther than anybody. That's his, but he's not the operations guy. He didn't even give himself a job in LinkedIn when he started LinkedIn. First thing he did was find a CEO, so lean into that, and that will be also your differentiator. So
I love that. Now, on your website, jaysamit.com, you have workbooks for Disrupt You and also for the new book, Future Proofing You. So in that workbook, do you have any of these things that we're talking about? Are there
absolutely
worksheets?
So if you're serious about doing this, first of all, let me lay out there. I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling masterminds. I'm not selling classes. You can't buy a t-shirt with my face on it. I'm just trying to pay it forward and help. So these 2 workbooks let you go through exercises at the end of each chapter. Because so much when we're reading, we go, yeah, that makes sense. Oh yeah, I got to do that. And then you get to the next chapter and it all kind of fades away. So this allows you to start planning your future, whatever that may be. And success doesn't mean money. Success means the freedom to live the life that you want. So the same tools that I'm talking about can solve social issues, can solve almost anything. And so the workbooks are there. And then the book also talks about something which is real big in marketing and PR today, which is sustainable capitalism. So capitalism is broken. The idea of having endless growth on a finite planet doesn't work. So eventually, companies are going to be forced by regulation to change their policies and go out of business. But if you can steer your clients to embrace this, you'll see that customers want to work with companies that have shared values. Employees want to work at a place with shared values. And I'll just take a real basic one. Walmart realized that after employees, their second biggest cost in overhead was electricity. So they went full court, got rid of the fluorescent lights, went everything, save $100 million a year in electricity. It's great for the planet, but they did it for the bottom line. But the second they do that, that puts a target on Target's back. So what did they have to do? They're the biggest installation of solar panels. So start focusing. And one of the most brilliant marketing campaigns of all time, I highlighted to start that chapter, Patagonia on Black Friday in the New York Times took out a full page ad, hundreds of thousands of dollars with a picture of their jacket, said, please do not buy this jacket. And if you read the whole copy, it's like, if you have a jacket, let's not waste, though we try to be good about it, making a jacket, we use this much water, this much material. If you have an old one, bring it in, we'll repair it. And they shared their values ahead of the bottom line. And that's given them brand loyalty that you can't fake. So that's a hint of where there's opportunity in marketing today.
That is a great example because Patagonia, they're very environmental and that's perfect. I love that. And it's an unexpected thing. And I think a lot of times people have a hard time with that with marketing. Can you give any other examples of something that you thought was really good and caught people off guard?
My secret sauce that I use something called OPM, other people's money. So whatever the target is that you're marketing to, let's say it's college students or whatever, you're not the only product in the world going after college students. And the other products aren't competitive. Maybe you sell sweaters and somebody else sells books, But if you can figure out how to frame your company as a solution for a bigger company trying to reach them, then they will spend their money to market you. So I'll give you a great example. I set up a digital music store for Sony that had to compete against iTunes. iTunes was advertising $100 million a year. I had zero marketing budget. So I looked, what's in the news? Who's in trouble? And one of the companies that was having a rough year was McDonald's. Spurlock's movie Super Size Me killed their sales. Sales were down 9%. What does that have to do with the digital music store? That's my job. If I can connect the dots, I'll get OPM, other people's money. So I went to McDonald's and said, I can make you hip and cool again. Buy a Big Mac, get a free track. Every time you get it on the side of the Big Mac, there's a little code and you can go to our store and download track. So they spent $60 million on TV commercials, tray liners, bags, everything you could think of. My first week of opening my digital store, they drove 20 million paying customers through the door for $0.00. I've used that model again and again and again. Solve for others to solve for you, and they'll spend the money to make you successful.
I love that. That's brilliant. Using partnerships to get the money to advertise and getting other people to talk about your product.
Big companies have big budgets, but not a lot of new ideas. Nobody gets promoted for new ideas. I've run large organizations. I've had hundreds of thousands of employees. So if you can do the job for that CMO, if you can make them look brilliant in Wednesday's marketing meeting, what do they care if that makes your company successful? You know? And so all of those various programs that I've been a part of, it was always to leverage the other guy's spend, the other guy's media. And one of the biggest opportunities that I have in Future Proofing You, which is $1 trillion opportunity, is all about getting the Googles and the Facebooks and everything to give you millions of dollars right now, because they're about to change something that replaces the phone and they need examples. And if you are something that shows it, they'll make it a success because they have a vested interest in getting people into that platform. So it's a great time to use this for marketing any company, any service.
I love that. That's a great example. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I do want to talk about so many things, but your TED Talk. So every client we have wants to do a TED Talk. So first of all, did the TED Talk change your life? And number two, how did you get a TED Talk?
So let me work backwards. TED and the creator of TED wrote a quote on the back of my book. TED's a great organization, but one day I'm sitting there and realizing this is a bunch of really rich, successful people sitting around at TED each year, being entertained by the smartest people in the world and patting themselves on the back of how brilliant they are. And this bugged me. I believe in dissemination of knowledge. So we actually threw the first TEDx at USC. We came up with that idea for TED Talks. And it was done at USC, and it's now, there's 3,000 of them a year all over the place. Anyone can throw a TED conference. You can go to their website, TED.org, and they show you the rules. You can't make any money off of it. They don't make any money. They don't charge you. So that was the background. And so I knew when I was doing my first book, I wanted to do a talk around it. So from my standpoint, I looked at various TED speeches to find who's throwing TED Talks that has good production values, right? To put your heart and soul into giving a great talk and the work that goes into it for somebody to, shoot it on their phone in a dimly lit room. So that's how I ended up in Augusta, Georgia at their TED. They do a great job. But what makes TED Talks so different is, unlike, and I speak for a living and I travel the world speaking, TED Talks have to be an exact length. So you literally have to go through a series of rehearsals with the stopwatch of somebody. So you literally have to memorize word by word, right? It's like giving a high school valedictorian thing. And because you've done it to that level, it's the effort that makes it the better talk. So anyone can do a TED Talk. Anyone can throw their TED. You could have, TEDx good, and throw the good TED Talk. But if you have a message to share, it's a great platform because billions of views every year, and it will find its audience. So highly recommend it. And if you haven't been to a TEDx conference, go. You'll meet some incredible people.
Yeah, I have been to several, and you're right, they're all incredible people. I also volunteered at TEDx Santa Monica, and that was a great experience. I think the hardest thing that I have in terms of challenges is explaining to my clients that it's not a promotion about you, it's about a big idea. So when you talk to people about coming up with a topic, how do you convey that to them? Because they just want to talk about the shiny object. I'm like, no, no, no.
So people connect with people. So there has to be an emotional through story, a through line that you're vulnerable and you share your vulnerability. So for me, if I'm doing a talk about how people have the power to change and disrupt themselves and do all this, I have to start with who am I? Not, look, I'm a CEO, I'm so smart. You have to start with, I went to school in Philadelphia. I couldn't read. There's 3 reading groups, the Eagles, the Hawks, and the Mud Hens. And at 5 years old, when you're labeled a mud hen, there's not a lot of expectations, right? So you share something of yourself. And one of the most popular ones that I found really interesting is a supermodel did the talk on modeling, but she diffused at the beginning and said, okay, I won the gene pool, that the way I happen to look happens to be popular. So she didn't make it an ego thing. But then she made fun of, here's my entire career. I have this pose walking. And then she showed 9,000 different ads in her life, all in the identical position. So any topic can work. And if people connect with you, then they will reach out to you. Then whatever it is that's your product or your shiny object, that's why there's a connection. Anybody can sell shoes. Anybody can make shoes. Who cares? But Tom's shoes, when you buy a pair, somebody that's never had shoes gets a pair. You instantly like that shoe. So that's what you do in a TED Talk.
That's a great example. I always tell them, tell a personal story, talk about your vulnerabilities, and talk about something big and a big idea. A lot of people, I think it's just hard, but it's really important. And when you're giving a TED Talk, in my opinion, is you're giving back to the world. And
you got to realize that it goes everywhere, that there's people that don't have access to this. This is the whole reason why we started the whole TEDx thing. There's people in India and Africa and Europe, all over, that could get and share some of your wisdom and some of your insights. And, there's an endless range of those. If you're still struggling, there's a number of books that have been written, Talk Like TED, to really break down what's worked and what hasn't. But I'm excited. One of my goals for future-proofing you was, when we come out of this pandemic lockdown, for Vin Clancy, the young man that I mentored, for him to do the TED Talk, because it's not my story. It's his story. It's the rags to riches, the hardship and everything, so that people can see him as a vulnerable human being and what he overcame in his life. So it will inspire others to take that leap of faith, as you said.
Yes, and I think it's the emotional connections that really draw us together. And that's what's so important in life, but also in marketing. Go ahead.
Marketing isn't about what a product does. It's about how a product makes you feel.
That's a great way to explain it, and making that connection so that you naturally attract people to talk about your brand and share your brand. And, just like me talking about your book, Future Proofing You. I mean, I want to tell everybody about this book, because not only have I read your first book, but after having this conversation, now I'm even more emotionally invested in the book.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, go here. We need a thriving middle class. The middle class got crushed this past year globally. Yeah. And the only people that create jobs are entrepreneurs. So if we can create more entrepreneurs and they're solving problems, the world gets better.
That's so important. That's so true. The last thing I want to ask you is a little more personal, and then we'll wrap up. And that is just, during the pandemic, you have been doing art, and you have been doing, it's watercolors, right? Can you talk a little bit about that project and how you marketed that?
Well, when the pandemic started, I assumed that we weren't as incompetent as a society as we turned out to be. Meaning, I thought maybe we'd be locked down for 30 days, 60 days, maybe 90 days. So in my private life, I always painted, and I wanted to show people a silver lining. And the silver lining was I fly around 200,000 miles a year. I suddenly had a gift of time. And if I ever had time, what I'd like to do is spend more time painting. So though painting was a private passion, was something I never shared in the business world, I decided to put myself out there, be vulnerable, and put up a painting a day for the first 100 days. I would have never imagined in my life that I'd hear from galleries around the world, art agents, and it would culminate with a solo show in New York, and now commissioned work by all kinds of people out there. It's mind-blowing, but it just shows you how connected we all are. And I was being transparent with how I was feeling, and people connected to those same emotions because I was painting what we were going through during the lockdown, during what we were missing, whether we're missing family or live music or anything. And people like the art. So I'm thrilled. I still can't reconcile, professional artists. So when the dealers sell to people, you see the famous people that bought your work. And so in my mind, I always imagined they had an empty space in their bathroom. It had to be for the bathroom. I'm just tickled pink, and it has given me so much confidence to try to work harder on my art.
Well, it's a really great story, and I've loved watching the paintings go up on Facebook. And where can people find the paintings?
On Instagram, there's Jay Samit Art, or in New York at Richard Tattinger Gallery. They're there for your enjoyment. So
fantastic. Well, this has just been so awesome. We can't wait to get this book. So tell us, is there, I'm pulling up the book again on my Kindle, Future Proofing You. And is there anything else that we left out, or tips you want to add before we sign off?
Just to tell everybody that's hearing my voice that I believe in you. I don't have to have met you. So Tom Bilyeu wrote that in the introduction. Humans are incredible. You're human. You're adaptable. That's how we've survived. You can make anything happen. And if I can ease your journey, if I can speed it up, for the price of a Frappuccino, why not? So wishing everybody great success. And thank you so much today, Liz.
Oh, I love that. And that's really what this podcast is all about. And our book, 8 Second PR, we just want to empower people to get out there and tell their story and change the world. So let's both go change the world, and everybody listening, go change the world, and go check out jaysamit.com.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of 8 Second Branding. Keep checking back for new shows featuring your host, Liz H. Kelly, on the Voice America Business Channel.